Welcome to another edition of This is Moose Country. This is episode 5, and joined as always by Brad Kusner. And Brad, pretty good guest on the way today that we chat with, General Manager Cam Russell.
Yeah, it was great to have Cam on. Obviously, a busy couple weeks with him with the trade deadline and lots of big moves. So it was exciting to have him on.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about his NHL career as well and some war stories from that. I think right off the hop, we should get into how the Mooseheads are playing right now. I think coming off a positive here on Sunday, 5-1 victory over St. John. There was back-to-back games against them. Kind of a close one the other night as well against Drummondville, the top team in the Western Conference. So how do you feel about the teams playing right now?
Yeah, I think, you take positives out of the weekend, obviously. The 5-1 win was great. I think the biggest positive is you have Drummondville in. Best team, in the Western Conference and one of the best teams in the Q. And, we're right there with them. It seemed like we kind of ran out of gas. They played a more veteran game where it didn't seem like they panicked. We were up a goal. They didn't really panic the whole time and showed that they were veterans, I think. But, when you're right in those games, that's amazing. And having on top of that Steinman play the way he did after that trade, it was lights out. Obviously losing Russo is huge. He's a great goalie, but bringing in Steinman to put up a performance like that in your first game is incredible. So, no, definitely a positive from that night. What did you see throughout the weekend?
Well, I guess first of all, you look at the team. It's a whole new look here going into those 3 games after the trade period. Russo gone. There's a youth movement taking place right now. 5 16-year-olds on the roster, and I thought that Coach Andrew Lord and his staff would have to be incredibly pleased with how they all turned out. Yeah, they ran out of gas against Drummondville, but 40 great minutes for sure in that game. You hung tough with one of the best teams in the league. Then you go to overtime, kind of let that one slip away against St. John at home. But again, another good performance. You get a point, and then come up with a decisive victory on Sunday. So I think, plenty of positives in a year where we've seen so much change, and they've really put their stamp on this team moving forward and developing around those 2007, 2008 birth years. And I think the Steinman point as well, you kind of ease the pain of fans who, it's obviously very sad to see Mathis Russo go. He was, a legend here and will always be. But to be able to bring in a guy who, also a 20-year-old who can play just as good really down the stretch here for the Moose. He's won a lot of fans over pretty quickly in his time. So I think you'll see some number 1 Mooseheads jerseys walking around the concourse here pretty soon.
And with the loss on the Saturday, you take the negative of, obviously we lost in overtime. And I think, if there's anybody who could do that game over the final few minutes, it would be Quinn Kennedy. But what a star he's been since coming in. 9 points in 8 games. Big part of the power play, having success as of late. One of those guys that's been electrifying since he got, when he gets the puck, you're excited. Kind of gets fans out of their seats a little bit. And so, not the way he wanted to end that. He took a penalty and then they scored on the power play. But, he's just been incredible for the team so far. Yeah,
offense pretty stagnant before Christmas at times, right? It was, hard to see where that creativity was coming from, guys. There were some bright spots. Obviously, Liam Kilfoyle having a good year. I think Carrier had stalled a bit, but he seems to be rejuvenated with Quinn on his line as well. So, point per game and better than that for Quinn Kennedy right now. And it just seems like the puck is flowing better. We talked to Cam a little bit about Carlos Handel coming up in the interview, and I liked him on the power play, how they're cycling that puck now. That was another kind of a sore spot for the Moose before Christmas, was that lackluster power play that looks like they've righted the ship a little bit right now. So I think, there's going to be lots of struggles down the stretch because it's a young team, and you start looking at the schedule and counting where you think wins could come from. It's, they may be few and far between, but it's all heading in the right direction. There's a lot of positives, and these guys are all part of it. I mentioned Liam Kilfoyle. What a game for him in front of some hometown fans in St. John on Sunday, is 2 goals and 2 assists, first star of the game. So great to see him do that.
Yeah, he just keeps getting better. The last little bit, they kind of put him and Carrier in Quinn together, and they had some chemistry. But I do like what Lordo's done, and Andrew Lord with switching the lines up, putting Kilfoyle by himself, and he's kind of done a great job of carrying that line. And it gives you a little bit more depth with having Carrier and Quinn on another line, so you can produce from two lines. He plays with McPhee, who doesn't really stop moving his feet ever.
Yeah.
But Kilfoyle's played great. He's been a leader for us at 17, which is impressive.
Yeah. Tough road trip for the boys kicking off tonight, though. In Rimouski against the Memorial Cup hosts. Then Friday, facing Drummondville for the second time. I don't know if that will go quite the same as we saw here in Halifax. Fingers crossed that it does. But the Volts will be tough on Friday. And then Blainville Boisbriand, no slouch themselves. They're kind of a hard team for me to figure out what they're doing. They traded Jonathan Fauchon, a really good player, to Rimouski, but then they make a couple of additions, I think, at the deadline. They've got Carbonneau, who's one of the best young stars in the league right now. They'll be no slouch. So tough road trip.
Yeah, it's Rimouski's obviously going for it, hosting the Mem Cup. This will be the first game, I believe, with Matejko in the lineup.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see with Catafort, Matejko. You got Fauchon, you got all these players. It'll be interesting to see how they manage their lines and the ice time, and having so many stars. So it'll be fun to watch. It'll be a tough game for the guys, just in older, stronger, faster team. But like they did with Drummondville, we have the ability to shut down the defensive zone. So you kind of hope that you rely on Steinman to make a few big saves and you capitalize on your opportunities. But having them followed by Drummondville, obviously one of the better teams in the league, and like you said about Blainville, they have a lot of. I think their last game they won 10-0 against Victoriaville.
Poor Victo.
Yeah, poor
Having a rough
Victo.
time.
I think they had 2 10-0 games and a 6-1 this weekend. So
Yeah.
But obviously high octane offense with Carbonneau and Norbert and these different players on Blainville. So it'll be a tough weekend. But that's you kind of got to take your licks and realize what these top teams do and how they play. And in the next couple of years, we hope to be there.
Yeah, if you can sneak out a few points here or there, that would be great too, right? But cool storyline with tonight, of course. It'll be Quinn Kennedy's first game back. It'll be Jack Martin and Lou Levesque playing their first game against the Mooseheads. Obviously, Matthew Catafort played against the Herd earlier this season. I think, second home game of the year, he played against the Moose. So kind of a Mooseheads Rimouski reunion tonight in the Quebec City.
Yeah, it'll be exciting. I'm sure something that as soon as Levesque and Martin and Quinn kind of that deal happen, you look at the schedule right away, and it's exciting for those guys going to a Memorial Cup team. Catafort obviously got to play here earlier this year and put his stamp on Halifax by scoring the game-winning goal. But no, I'm sure they're all excited for it. It'll be a good game.
Yep. Well, that is the latest with the Moose right now, going into this big road trip. Let's move it over now to a little fact or fiction. We did this last episode, I think. You were hit or miss.
Hit or miss. I think I said Moose weren't going to make any more deals, and they made 2 more deals.
Yeah. Hey.
And 2 pretty big deals. I think,
but down to the wire.
Yeah, down to the wire. So they kept us on the edge of our seats here. But you're going to jump in on this too. So so I'm not the only one who's messing up.
All right. Yeah, and we will talk about those trades with Cam Russell coming up here in just a few minutes. Get some good thoughts from him and how they all kind of transpired. But all right, fact or fiction, I'll start, then you can toss it right back to me. Rimouski won the trade period, and that's the additions of Matejko, Fauchon, Maël Levine, Martin Levesque. They made some big moves.
I will definitely say fact. Obviously, Moncton made some additions during the summer, which were big. Vidicek, McKinnon, they've made a couple others, getting Gill, Cote. But, to get the top scorer in the league, to get a big, 6'6" forward in Levine, Matejko is probably one of the best forwards, one of the best Euros in the whole league. I think it has to be fact for me. What would you say?
Fact as well. I think that's backs are against the wall when you're the Memorial Cup hosts in terms of pressure from the fan base, from ownership. Like, you've got to do something. And I think former Moosehead Danny Dupont did an excellent job to go out and and win this trade period and really get their team bulked up for a run at the Memorial Cup. They're the only team in the country that can say we have a 1-4 shot right now at winning it. So let's go out and bolster the lineup, and that's exactly what they did. They get some toughness, some steadiness on D. They get scoring, high octane scoring. They've kind of did it all with the trade period.
Yep.
All right, number 2. Mathis Rousseau will win 20 games as a Moncton Wildcat. Now, he's got one under his belt and 25 games to go. So that's winning a lot.
So 19 more to go.
And I know he likes to he will take the ball and run with it. He likes to play.
He'll play
right?
25 games. Yeah. I will say fact. I think I don't know their schedule, but a guy like this, a team like this, they're already a steady team. They're already really good, top in the league. And then to add a, high-end goalie, one of the best in the country, and he's a game breaker. Mm-hmm. So I think even the games that maybe the defense, maybe the forwards aren't playing as well, he's a guy who's gonna show up. So I will say fact.
And really exciting show when we just agree with each other all the time. But I will also say fact, because I can just see he's that type of guy that just gets dialed in and can really lock in on that next level. And he's going to, have his eyes on the prize right now. He knows it's his last shot in junior to win it all. And don't know if we've seen anybody quite like it around here in recent times, and with how he can just really get dialed, and I think Rooster will make the Moncton fans very happy here down the stretch. So yes, I'll say fact, he will win 20 games with the Wildcats. One of Rimouski, Drummondville, or Moncton will be upset in the first round of the playoffs.
This will be?
Yeah, will get upset. One of those three. Who are, you could say, those are the top 3 teams, right?
Yeah, I will say fact.
Ooh.
Yeah, I think this is a shot in the dark here, but I do think the bottom end of our division, if you look at Bathurst, Baie-Comeau, Cape Breton, obviously they won't. I don't think they'll play Chicoutimi or Moncton, but
right.
Quebec has been playing well lately. Charlottetown's been playing well lately. You run into a team who's kind of coming in hot and has good goaltending, and anything can happen. It might be a stretch. But I will say fact.
All right. Well, Mooseheads could be playing Drummondville first round. That's how it would match up right now. I don't know if that would be an upset there or not. Would love for it to be, but I'll say fiction. I think those 3 teams it's gonna be one of those years where the top teams really, the cream rises to the top in the queue, and they're gonna make it all the way to the semifinals and go from there. But all right, first time we disagree.
Had to disagree on at least one of them.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
A Q player will reach 100 points scored this season. Currently, Jonathan Fauchon leading the way with 64, fewer than 30 games to play.
I will say fact. I think with a player like this, and there's a couple others that have the chance to do it. But especially a player like this put on a better team. You got to think that their power play figures it out. They're struggling right now, but with so much firepower, you got to think that they kind of hit their stride. I will say fact.
And I'll say fiction. Because of all that great firepower, I think it might get spread out in Rimouski. Right. So he might, Fauchon could slow down a little bit, I think, in terms of his rate of scoring.
Interesting.
First Q player taken at the NHL draft will be Denoyer, Carbonneau, or Zonin. That's Caleb Denoyer with Moncton, Justin Carbonneau with Blainville, or Bill Zonin of Rouen. Which one?
Big fan of all 3, obviously. Zonin's having an incredible year, second in points right now. Carbonneau is an absolute bull and a great player. I will still say Denoyer.
So will I. Yeah, I mean, I think it is fact. Caleb Denoyer will be the top player taken from the queue. Carbonneau having a great year. He's got a late birthday, so he's a little bit older than the rest of them. He's got that November birthday. Bill Zonin really coming on. I remember him coming in to Halifax as a rookie and scoring a really nice goal. And, he's a big guy and has really continued his development. But I think, Caleb Denoyer still the one, the apple of the eye of the scouts right now. He's kind of got it all.
Yeah, he's an interesting player where he can, if you project down the road, you think he can put up points at that next level. If it doesn't work out in that sense, I look at a guy like Sean Couturier, in the sense big body, can kind of play in every situation. If he's your PK, if he's your third line, fourth line, you're still in a really good spot. But also, has the ability to play offensively as well.
All right, that is your fact or fiction, and time now to throw it over to an interview that we're pretty happy to have here. A timely one with the way the team has been playing, youth movement in effect, the trade deadline. So let's hear from Cam Russell, the general manager of the Halifax Mooseheads. And we're joined now by Mooseheads general manager Cam Russell. Cam, lots to get at here. You've been a busy man recently, but thanks for being here and doing this today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show, guys.
Coming off a big win Sunday. It was good to see the Mooseheads kind of get back on track, which included the first career win for young Nick Circa, 33 saves in that one. Your thoughts on picking up the victory in St. John?
Well, I think it was a much-needed win. I think the team's been playing really well since the trade period. It's been tough since Christmas. We've got a young hockey team right now. And I know Andrew's pushing the guys hard, and we have some new faces out there. Guys are trying to get used to each other, and we're trying to create some chemistry here. But there's times when you need a win just to keep yourself going, and that was one of those days. So it was good to win the game. It was great for Nick.
Yeah, we'll talk a bit about this youth movement that's in effect now, clearly with the team. But I think I'd like to get you to walk me through the trade period a little bit, including your big deals, starting with the Rimouski trade. That was the one that kicked it off, sending Jack Martin, Lou Levesque to the Memorial Cup hosts for Quinn Kennedy. So talk about the players that on the outs and the player you got in return.
Well, I think for me, I look at it as really starting back at the draft. Moving Cata forward, moving McKinnon, moving Vidicek, and bringing in some draft picks that we didn't have at that time, and Carrier as well. So coming into the Christmas trade period, we didn't feel like there was a whole lot to do. We built our team a little bit through the draft. We had a lot of good young kids there, but we had an opportunity to bring in Quinn, and we know Quinn very well. He was a high draft pick, and it was a deal that on the surface was great for us. It was where we're headed right now. It made a lot of sense. And obviously, at that time, Lou was looking to get a little closer to home. And we just felt that, with Rimouski being the head coach, being Lou's old coach, and being a little closer to home and a hosting team, it was a great spot to send Jack and Lou. So it was a deal that helped out both sides.
Yeah. Now, you started off with a splash on day one. I know a ton of work went into the middle and then kind of left it all to the last minute here, but just walk us through what the Russo deal looked like. Obviously, it wasn't an over the night kind of thing, but the prep into getting that, and then moving on from a guy like that and bringing in such a key player like Steinman.
Well, I think if you look at the past with our hockey team, when there's years like this year where you're rebuilding, restructuring your team, we try to help out as many of our older players as we can to go to contending teams. I mean, there's no secret that, we're not a contending team this year. And a guy like Mathis Russo has done so much for our team and the organization and for the fans here that, we really wanted to give him a chance to go somewhere to win. So, there weren't a lot of teams, to be honest, and that's, not a slight to Mathis. Mathis is the best goalie in the league if you look at the last couple of years. But Moncton was really the one team that pursued him from the start. So, it was a deal that obviously wasn't done overnight, and we wanted to make sure it made sense for us. Obviously, we're trying to help Mathis out, but it also had to help the organization too. But we're very pleased with how it turned out at the end.
How late in the game did they add Logan Crosby into the mix?
You know what? That actually started the day before the trade period or the trade deadline. That was they had made a move. They moved Loshing, so they needed to bring in another top nine forward, and started talking to us about Logan. Taylor McDougall, the GM in Moncton, was Logan's agent before this,
Right.
so he knew him very well. And just for, like I say, where we are right now, where we're going, just another opportunity for us to kind of get something to build towards the future, and at the same time help Logan out and send him to a contending team.
Now, you also brought in Callum O'Coin last minute from Cape Breton. What have you seen out of him? What can he add to the lineup here moving forward?
Well, you know what, Callum's a great skater, hard worker, a good penalty killer. He's 18 years old, so you know we're a young team now. You're bringing in a guy that's got a little bit of experience. You know, it's not like it's another 16 or 17-year-old. So a bit of an older guy really brings stability right now to our fourth line. But you know, we feel that he's a guy that can definitely help us down the stretch, and you know, we're excited to see what he can bring us next year as well.
Early returns have been good. Quinn Kennedy, 9 points in 8 games. You got to like the creativity he's brought to the offensive side of things.
Yeah, you know, I mean, looking at the middle, our centers down before the trade period, we were just so young, you know, and a bit of inexperience there, and it's such a tough position. So Quinn coming in and you know, being a centerman, bringing a little bit more experience, taking some pressure off Guilfoyle really was something that we were excited about. And you know, he's just such a patient, smart hockey player. You know, he's a great skater. He doesn't mind skating pucks out of trouble. Great vision. You know, he's given us the same effort every night, and we know the kid. You know, before this, he's just such a great person. So, great addition for our club.
Now, you brought in, or we brought up, earlier, Circa, but a couple other additions. You have Bent, you have Ty Fair, you have Chiris. You know, what do you see out of them? You know, what have they brought to the lineup? You know, we have a couple 16-year-olds, so obviously a lot of learning, but what do you see out of them?
Yeah, it's tough. You know, we're carrying 5 16-year-olds right now, which we've never done before. So there's going to be a lot of tough nights for the kids, for the coaches, the fans. It's all part of the process. You know, that that being said, things changed quite a bit when the NCAA rule change came into effect November. Then you saw a guy like Matthew Tyfair want to come and play for Halifax because he could now. So, you know, for us, that was something we definitely wanted to jump at. And then a guy like Will Bent, same thing, you know, an American that's an NCAA bound guy. Now he has the opportunity to come play in the CHL. We feel that it's the best route for him, and obviously he felt the same way. You know, so it's really changed the landscape of how we're looking at things right now, and moving forward. It's gonna be a lot of discussions on how we build our team with this rule change. And then, you know, Justin Shiraz came to camp, stayed for 48 hours because of the rule, the NCAA rule, left. We really liked the way he played. And, you know, once that rule changed, he wanted to come back, and we were more than happy to come back. And, you know, trading Jack Martin, that enabled us to open up a spot for him. So it's definitely been interesting the last couple of months.
Yeah, I think like the Moncton trade, the Rimouski trade are things that as fans we can kind of predict to happen, things that you kind of expect. But then with this rule changes, suddenly you've got 4 players that you're adding without giving up assets. So that's great for the team, obviously, and great for the future of the league to be able to add players like that to rosters. You know, what kind of curveball has this thrown you as general managers in this Canadian Hockey League right now that you've got to suddenly pivot and deal with this sort of thing? And I mean, it's a good thing, but also you got to think pretty quickly on your feet now.
Yeah, honestly, I think it's a great thing. It's a great thing for the players, first and foremost. You know, now they don't have to make that tough decision at 15 or 16 years old. Which route are they taking? Is it NCAA? Is it major junior? And if I go major junior, then I'm there for the whole, you know, I'm there for the haul. It's, I'll be honest, it's going to make it a little more difficult, because now you can bring in these great young players, but you're trying to gauge how long they're going to be with you for. That being said, from the schools that we've talked to, they're very excited about this, because now they don't have to rush their players. You know, where in the past they would have 18, 19-year-old kids that they really didn't have a place for them to play, so they would bring them to their NCAA teams and maybe not quite be ready for it. If you look at the average age of NCAA players, they're quite a bit older. They're in their early 20s. So I know that a lot of the NCAA schools are very excited to have us be a great place for these young players that choose that route to play in the meantime.
It kind of benefits all parties, doesn't it? Like you benefiting NCAA, benefiting the CHL, and most importantly, I think the development of the players themselves.
Yeah, I mean, there's no secret. We all hated each other before this. You'd go to a tournament, you'd see an NCAA guy there. He wouldn't talk to you. You wouldn't talk to them. I mean,
it's competition, right?
Yeah, we were going after the same players. You'd go to a tournament, you wouldn't want to drive down there in a company car because you were afraid the windows might be smashed when you come. I mean, that wouldn't happen. But anyways, like I said, we've sat down with some of these schools and their coaches, and they're excited. It's going to benefit them. It's going to benefit us, and you go from that real competitive edge where we were all going after the same players. Now we're all trying to help each other with the same players, and it's been a pretty cool process.
So in the past, you've drafted a couple players that have gone that route that you didn't get. Matt Boldy, Alex Newhook, and one we were just chatting about, Jack Eichel.
Most notably.
Turned out to have an okay career.
Yeah, he was all right.
Yeah, but how close were you on that? Just walk us through that.
You know what? I mean, the funny thing is we were actually pretty close. I mean, we put in a lot of work with Jack and his family and met with them quite a bit and talked to them. And they were spectacular people. Their parents were just wonderful through the whole process. We were very close. We know that USA Hockey put a lot of pressure on him to stay there. That's like losing, Connor McDavid or.
It would have done the same both ways, right? Like CHL would have tried the same.
Exactly, 100%. So you can't fault them for that. They're protecting, one of their best players. I mean, you look at what that would have looked like, and we were talking about earlier. If he would have come up here his first year. Because he had a late birthday, he would have played with, would have been Eichel, Drouin, McKinnon the first year.
Not bad.
The next year would have been Eichel, Drouin, Ehlers, and Meyer. And then his third year, it would have been Eichel, Ehlers, and Meyer. So, it would have been a lot of fun for the fans.
Maybe another Cup here?
I love that the first year you're throwing Marty Frk's not even involved in this, and he had about 180 goals every year. So he's the fourth player. He's irrelevant.
Brad Cuzner was in there somewhere.
He had 6 goals.
Him
minus 95. I
have a question about the whole NCAA rule change. Like if, say, we have a player here for the Mooseheads that is bound for the NCAA, gets drafted at 18 and signs his entry-level contract before he goes, is that mean he can't go NCAA or?
Yeah, exactly. So, that's the beauty of bringing those great young players in here. If they have success early and if they do get drafted to the NHL and sign an NHL contract, then there's no more NCAA eligibility. Right. So then they would stay with you until their eligibility in junior is over.
Right.
Interesting. So how much does this switch the draft now? Does it kind of equalize the American players to the Canadian players? How do you kind of approach that?
Well, that's a challenge for everybody right now. We all have our Quebec scouts. We have our Maritime scouts. We have our U.S. scouts, which, we've added a couple more guys now. But now you have the process where, before your U.S. scouts would give you the name of a few good players. And maybe you take a flyer on a couple guys, and like we did with Will Bent in the 14th round, Brady Schultz, another great 14th round.
Best 14th round pick ever at the moment.
Yeah, so, now we've got to mix all these guys together. We've done a little more cross-territory scouting this year where, Ali and I and Tipper LeBlanc have gone to the States and gone into Quebec. And, so we've seen the Maritime kids, we've seen the Quebec kids, the U.S. kids, and Mark Bonin from Quebec is going to do the same. So then we've got to put all those guys together, and it's a whole new territory. I mean, we've had New England before, but now you actually really have it. So that's going to be the challenge, not just for us, but for everybody. I mean, obviously those U.S. kids still have the USHL or NAHL or some of these other leagues they could play in, prep schools. So is still work to be done with those kids. Yeah, it's definitely going to be it's going to be interesting this year how it all unfolds.
And it's not like you have extra picks to do this with. The draft's actually moving from 14 rounds to 12 rounds this year, right? So there's got to be some talent, even locally, that might slip through the cracks, perhaps, and maybe see some free agent invites at camp.
Yeah, that's definitely going to happen. I mean, it's going to happen in Quebec. It's going to happen in the Maritimes. I think really with the U.S. kids now being such a real option that every pick is so important. We've always we tended to be a team that moved up in the draft and kind of tried to build our team around first, second, third round pick sort of thing. I think now you're going to be going to the 7th, 8th, 9th round, and there's still going to be some potentially really good hockey players left there. And like I say, every pick's going to be very important. Like you said, Scotty, there's fewer now. There's 12 rounds, not 14. So we're just going to make sure we do our homework.
With the switching back to the team, obviously a lot younger, in a retool, rebuild. Looking for the second half of the season, what do you and Lordo kind of take away? What do you push for the second half of the season on these young guys?
Well, I think, you have your team now. It's not like the first half of the year. You go into the trade period, you're getting closer. Kids are wondering if they're going to be here. Veterans are wondering if they're going to be traded. So everybody knows they're here till the end of the season. So it's creating that chemistry with the group that you have, giving everybody the opportunity to play in every situation and just working the kids in practice and developing them. And, they're going to be put in situations where they're going to fail and that's all part of it. I mean, that's where you learn the most is when you do fail those tough days really shape who you are, and that'll also help us analyze all the kids because right now even though it's a regular season, it's still a tryout. We're still looking at these kids and trying to figure out where they're going to fit next season. So it's going to be a lot of development and hard work in the second half for everyone.
As it stands right now, you're in the draft lottery, obviously heavily scouting some of these higher end players that will be available. So you have a high pick in the Q draft. You're going to have a high pick in the Euro draft to go along with Carlos Handel, who's really come along this season, I think. And then with this NCAA rule change, does that really expedite the cycles of junior hockey? Are they about to change in terms of the length it would take to rebuild?
Easy answer, but it could.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could. I mean, and that's something I've had a lot of talks with Taylor McDougall, the GM of Moncton. I've known Taylor for a long time. As I said before, he was an agent before this, and we kind of feel the same way. Talking to Rimouski and some of the other teams as well, it's basically doubled your pool of players, so it should help speed up the process of a rebuild. Yeah, I mean it's not just the Maritimes and Quebec and a couple of kids from Ontario. And now you've got New England there. So the good news is to the fans, yes, it should help speed up these rebuilds.
Now, we just spoke about Carlos Handel, great World Juniors. Obviously a young player came over and is still developing. What have you seen out of him? Like, how much of a step has he taken this season for us?
You know what? I mean, the one thing about Carlos, we talk about all the time, Allie McDonald and I, we spend a lot of time, watching these kids and scouting as do all our other scouts. But the one thing you look for with a lot of them or most of them is the unteachables. Maybe they're a hard worker. You can kind of help people turn into a hard worker. You can help teach certain things, but there's unteachable skills too. And that's poise with the puck. That's hockey sense. That's a guy that makes the right pass at the right time and doesn't panic under pressure. And those are the things that Carlos has. I think he still has parts of his game obviously that he's got to improve. But he's come so far just in the first half of the season. He's playing more physical now. he's not taking as many risks with the puck. And, you look at time on ice at the end of the day, there's a lot of nights most nights, he's the guy that plays the most minutes. So really turning into a dependable guy, but he has those unteachable skills that, like I say, they're very hard to find. So very excited, exciting player, and great to have him here.
Yeah, I've enjoyed the last few games. I think seeing him out on the power play, it looks like cycling the puck well with Kennedy out there, and Carrier as well. The puck movement's been a lot better on that power play with him out there, I think.
Yeah, I think, both those guys, we looked at our power play before we looked at shooting the puck more. And I mean, I'm not going to sit here and tell you all the things we looked at. That's Andrew's job, not mine. I'm the guy up the stands yelling shoot like all the other things. But, no, it's, Quinn came in, and Quinn's another guy that really helps that power play. But yeah, Carlos, like I say, he doesn't panic under pressure. He sees those passes that a lot of other players won't see, and makes exciting, fun plays. And for me, that's what I like to see. I was a player that banged it off the glass, and I don't think people came there or paid their money to watch me play. But guys like Carlos and Quinn, those are the fun, exciting guys. Obviously they're not the only two guys, but they've definitely helped their power play.
Perfect segue, maybe, to talk a little bit about your career, eh? You did have an excellent career going back, especially in the Q. Played on some great Hull Olympics teams in the mid '80s. Wore a letter 3 of your 4 years, including a captain in '88, '89. Just talk about those teams, how good they were, some of the players you played with, and a couple of great coaches as well.
Yeah, you look back then, man, that's a long time ago. Hard to believe. It's almost 5 years, 6 years ago.
Yeah.
I was fortunate. I had 2 great coaches. Pat Burns, my first 2 years. Alain Vigneault, my last 2 years in junior. Great guys. Pat was an undercover cop. The first day I saw him, I was at the rink, and a guy drove by in a Harley with a beard and long hair and tattoos all over him. I asked I saw our captain wave to him. I said, "Who's that?" He said, "That's our coach." So he was, he was the only guy on the bench. There were no assistant coaches. There was him, and there was the trainer. And the trainer did, we call him a trainer. He did everything, medical equipment. I mean, if he was taking stitches out, he'd have pliers and toenail clippers. That's how you got your stitches out. He'd put them in, and he'd take them out. So it was a bit of the Wild West back in those days. But man, it was such a great place to play. So many good players. My first year there, we went to the Memorial Cup. We had 2 guys that both had 191 points each, Guy Rouleau and Luc Robitaille. We lost in the finals in the Memorial Cup that year. 2 years later, we went to Memorial Cup again. I'm just laughing. I'm thinking how different the game is now. Wayne Gretzky actually owned our team.
Right.
The first year I went to Hull, Gretzky had bought the team. So that year we lost in the finals at the Memorial Cup, and Gretzky sent the whole team to Florida as a thank you to the kids. So I'm 16 years old, and we roll into the hotel in Miami. We sent us to Fort Lauderdale, I think it was, and we all gathered in the lobby, and Pat looked at his watch. He said, "Okay, we'll meet back here at 8 a.m. next Tuesday. We'll see you then." He turned us loose on the town.
Times have changed.
Yeah, times have changed quite a bit now. So it was, like I say, Pat was, but he was such an interesting guy because he was such a hard guy. He was a motivator. He wasn't an X and O's guys. It was just motivation. Great speaker. Always said the right things. I remember my first year missing my mom and my dad. I wanted to go home, and he spent the day with me, and just stuff like that, little things like that. He was a gruff, tough son of a gun, but he also had a real soft side to him too. That I think made him just which is one of the reasons why he was such a great coach.
How fun was it to be a defenseman in an era where this player is getting 191 points?
How fun was practice?
Yeah. No, it was, Those days, I mean, if you let in 6 or 7 goals, that was just the norm, so it wasn't too bad. But it was a different time, that's for sure.
Then maybe walk us through that. Obviously led to you being drafted in the 3rd round in 1987 by the Chicago Blackhawks, where you had a long portion of your career in the Windy City. What was draft day like for you? Was that something, were you there in person, or are you watching at home, or hearing about it at home?
Yeah, you know what? Actually, during that time, the draft, if you were 17, which is the year you get drafted now for most kids, you could only get drafted in the first 3 rounds. So that added to the stress, because I think I was ranked in the 3rd round. The draft was in Detroit, and I was there with my mom and my dad, and I don't think I ate for 4 days before the draft, and I went down with another guy, Kevin Grant from Sackville. He had played in Kitchener, I think, and then Kevin was drafted to Calgary in the 2nd round, and then Chicago took me in the 3rd round, and I mean, it was you don't enjoy it going into it. You really don't. It's too bad, because it's such a great experience, but it's also just such a stressful time for kids. But I probably even worse for parents, obviously. But once it happened, man, what an experience it was. And they always tell you it flies by. It sure does.
Yeah.
Now in '92, you guys go to the Stanley Cup Finals versus the Penguins. Just tell us about that experience, the playoff run, what it meant to be in the Stanley Cup Finals.
Yeah, I spent most of the year in the minors, and we lost out, I think, in the 1st round that year, and Chicago called me up, and we were playing St. Louis 1st round, and they were up 2-1, and Mike Keenan, who was coaching the team, scratched one of our veteran defensemen, put me in the lineup. We won that game. They put me in the next game.
Can't change it.
We ended up winning 11 in a row. So, and then we lost. We played Pittsburgh in the finals. So I got in that 12th game for me was game 1 in Pittsburgh, and we lost that game. So I didn't see another. I didn't see another game after that. But
pretty good Pittsburgh team in those days.
Must have been my fault.
Yeah.
But what an experience. I mean, I remember game 4. We were back in Chicago, and we were down 3-0, and Dirk Graham came in the room before the game, our captain, and he said, "I'm going to play the best game of my life." And he went out and he had a hat trick in the 1st period. Wow. It still wasn't enough.
Yeah.
I mean, it was surreal watching Lemieux out there and Jagger and the rest of the guys. It didn't matter what you did. They'd just go out the next shift and do something 10 times better. And so it was, they beat us 4 straight, but man, what an experience.
How crazy is it Jagger's still playing? Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I think he's only a year younger than me, too. Maybe 2 years younger.
Yeah. But you played in Hockey Helps Homeless, so you still got it.
What's that?
You played in Hockey Helps Homeless, so
I still got it.
So you still got it. You and Yager are still on the same level.
We're pretty close. Yeah. I fell down in front of the net there last month, and I felt like I broke my hips.
Yeah, been on the IR ever since.
Not as tough as I used to be.
You talk about, being tough. You obviously had a couple fights throughout your career, with some, Hall of Fame tough guys. Just talk us through, maybe who your toughest guy, who were you most nervous going in, who you beat up the worst.
I didn't beat up too many guys. You know what my philosophy was, always fight the toughest guy on the other team, because if you lose, you don't look bad.
Yeah.
And I remember Jim Cummins. I played with Jimmy, and Jimmy was my roommate on the road and probably my best friend in Chicago. Just a spectacular guy. He scouts for Calgary now, and one of the most comical guys you'll ever meet. And I remember I had a fight. I can't remember who I fought, but Jimmy came in after the game, and the coach did his thing, talked to the team, and then after that, the injured guys and the guys that were scratched usually come around, kick you in the shin pads, tell you good job. And Jimmy came up to me and he looked at me and he just burst out laughing. He said to me, he goes, "Man, you got beat up by a middleweight. Man, you might lose your job." And then he just walked away. But that's how Jimmy was. There was no filter on Jimmy. We actually got in a fist fight on an airplane commercial flight one time. He's just one of those guys. You love the guy, but he could also push your buttons at the same time. But Oh man. Anyways, yeah, like I say, that was my philosophy, and it was also you had to be able to look yourself in the mirror the next day. So I knew I wasn't going to run the power play. So you're talking the '80s and the '90s. Back then, if players were taking liberties on your top players, or if you needed a spark to get your team going, then you wouldn't be looking around waiting for someone else to do it.
Darren McCarty and Cam Russell, and now they come together. A wild right miss from Russell, a left maybe got in from McCarty, and now they battle. Playing McSorley, wrestling and throwing haymakers with Cam Russell. They now neutralize one another at center ice.
So yeah, that's pretty well how it started, and my coach at that time was Darryl Sutter, and he respected me, and he liked that, and my teammates respected me as well. And it's obviously a tough job. It's not a lot of fun, but I think it's part of that was who I was. I think I'm a bit of an angry guy at times, so it does come out. But
Scotty knows.
Yeah. I've taken the heat on that. No, joking. But talking about maybe the mid '90s Blackhawks had quite a team of tough guys, like yourself included. Bob Probert was there. Stu Grimson was there at one point as well. What kind of team was that? Like, obviously surrounded by toughness.
Yeah, I think Ryan Vandenbush was there, Enrico Ciccone, Jim Cummins. At one point, we had traded for Dennis Bonvie too. Wow. At the end of my career, it was tough because when I first started, it was myself and Mike Peluso and Stu Grimson, and they were the two legitimate heavyweights. I was a guy going out there standing up for my teammates. That's what you get when you get beat up every time. Way to stand up for your teammates. Anyways, and then Stu Grimson, I think, got traded, and Mike Peluso. So all of a sudden, I found myself, I think one season I had 22 fights. Well, Jim Cummins comes along, Bob Probert comes along, all the rest of the guys, you couldn't buy a fight. You'd be chasing guys around, but everybody wanted to fight Proby. It was a feather in your cap if you could fight Bob Probert. Right. So everybody, we joked about it in the dressing room. You couldn't do anything to buy a fight. Everybody wanted to make sure that before they retired, they could tell everyone that they fought Bob Probert.
It's funny that it's a feather in your cap to say you fought Probert, but to hear somebody say, "Yeah, I want to fight Bob Probert," sounds crazy.
You're a maniac.
Like, yeah.
You got to remember that. Like I said, it was a stressful, tough time when you're thinking about it. I was listening to somebody talk about Dave Schultz the other day, and he said he never looked at the schedule. Because if he looked at the schedule, he'd be stressing out for days knowing that he'd have to fight Terry O'Reilly or Cashman or whoever. Mm-hmm. And I remember going through that process. You'd be looking at this, it'd be a Monday afternoon, you'd be like, oh, we're playing Toronto on Thursday. You got to fight Domi. Mm-hmm. You'd be thinking about it for 3 days. Yeah. So it's obviously a different job, but once you get used to it and it becomes your role, and at the end of the day, it kind of becomes part of who you are, then you start to look at things like that. Like Bob Probert, probably the best fighter, the toughest guy that's ever played in the NHL. So that was a pretty cool thing to be able to tell your buddies back home in the summer that you fought Bob Probert.
He could also play the game pretty well too, though, right?
I think
score.
I think he had 29 goals and 300 penalty minutes one year, and he was. And I was lucky. I played with him for 4 or 5 years. And the funny thing about him is, we had some great hockey players, but when you had friends and family come to town, everybody wanted to meet Proby. It wasn't, Roenick or Chelios. It was always Proby. And honest to God, nicest guy you'd ever meet. Never disappointed. Just a genuine, down-to-earth, nice guy. Everybody left saying the same thing. Oh, my God, man, I can't believe what a nice guy. So it was... No, he was just a wonderful person.
Talked about all the toughness of the players, but you've also mentioned a couple of tough coaches, Mike Keenan being one of them, and Darryl Sutter. What was it like playing for them? Any good stories you could share about those two guys?
Oh my God! I think back to the coaches that I've had over the years with Pat Burns, Alain Vigneault, Darryl Sutter, Mike Keenan, Bob Hartley. Craig Hartsburg. Craig Hartsburg was a nice guy. Just a real nice. The other guys
doesn't fit in with the rest of them, right?
And I'm probably missing somebody, but yeah, I'm trying to think what I can talk about with Mike. I mean, he was Mike was a unique guy. Probably the one thing I remember the most about him was I was called up one year. I was in the minors in Indianapolis and was called up to play in Chicago. And we practiced in St. Louis at that time. We were playing them the next day. We flew in, and their game rink was closed. So we dressed at the rink, got in the bus, dressed with our gear, went to the practice rink. And halfway through the practice, the blade of my skate broke. And so anyways, I couldn't practice the rest of the time. So I sat in the stands and watched. And when the practice was over, the trainer came up. He said, "Cam, Mike wants to talk to you." So I went in there, and Mike said, "Why didn't you finish the practice?" I said, "Well, my skate broke." He goes, "It's not an excuse. Get the hell out of here. You're going down to the minors." And I was sitting there, I was thinking, what was I supposed to do? My skate blade broke. No, sorry, before that, he asked me, he said, "Where's your second pair of skates?" I said, "Mike," I said, I play in the minors. We're lucky if we have a second pair of laces." He goes, "No, that's not an excuse. Get out of here. You're going down to the minors." So all I could think of was, okay, everybody's always said you got to stand up to Mike, and that's what he wants. So I said, this is my chance to stand up to Mike. I'm going to tell him exactly what I think. So you're allowed to swear on this? You can't.
Yeah.
So what I wanted to say in my toughest, meanest voice was, "That's bullshit." But I came out, I said, "Mike, that's bullshit." My voice cracked because I was so afraid of him. He just kind of laughed and threw me out. Anyways, he didn't send me down, but that's the kind of guy he was. I mean, he was big on the mind games, and it was tough, man. He was, honestly, the people you talk to that knew him, Mike is a good guy deep down, but man, the mind games were hard back in those days. But at the end of the day, it helped shape who I was, and it put a lot of adversity at you that you had to work through.
And then you go into Darryl Sutter, who's
a pussy
not a whole lot easier, but I've always enjoyed listening to him speak and the things that he says. He has puts a lot of thought into the few words that he seems to say.
Yeah. I was. We were talking about it earlier. I mean, I've got 1,000 stories with Darryl, and Darryl was probably, I liked all my coaches, but he was probably my favorite, and I knew he'd never say it, but I knew he liked me. And you could be in the dressing room, and if he looked at you and gave you a little punch in the shoulder, then you knew he liked you that day. So he was a man of few words. But I remember one day we were in the dressing room, and Jim Cummins was laughing at something he'd read in the paper, and I think he started the conversation out by asking me if I'd read the paper, and I said no, and he just laughed. He goes, "Don't, whatever you do." Anyways, we read the paper, and I think Darryl had said something like, the only time you see Russell and Noonan are on the 15th and 30th when they got their paychecks in their back pocket and they're looking for the back door out of the rink with ski masks on. So he didn't mince words, but I still knew he liked me.
Yeah, good way to motivate her too, right?
Yeah. Back then, that's kind of, that's how they motivated, and it worked.
But the next day came in and gave you a punch in the shoulder, so you knew you were good.
Or he'd just pour his coffee, look at you, and walk away.
Yeah.
And then you knew he was mad at you that day.
You are part of, we talk about your toughness, but a goal-scoring trivia question with the Tampa Bay Lightning involved. Tell that story.
Yeah, so not a lot of people know, but I scored the first ever goal against the Tampa Bay Lightning. I never got the plus for it because I was on the bench having a drink of water, but I skated the puck to the red line. I dumped it, flipped it up in the air, and I made it to the bench just as it bounced and went through the goalie's legs to score the first ever goal against Tampa Bay Lightning. And interestingly enough, the goalie was Wendell Young, another Halifax native. So it was pretty cool.
No, that's awesome.
Was that one of your most skilled goals?
It was right up
Your
there.
career.
It was one of the 9, yeah.
And the Tampa franchise are like, that's not a great way to start. No, that's great. Do you want to move on to the quick hits?
Yeah, you take them.
All right, we've been keeping you here long enough, so we're gonna do some quick hits with you here, where you can just give the first word that comes to mind. Most talented player you played with?
Oh, man. Peter Forsberg.
Most talented player you've had you're here with the Mooseheads?
God, there's going to be some guys that hate me for this. Honestly, like Jonathan Drouin had crazy talent, crazy skill, yeah.
Funniest player you played with?
Well, the funny thing with that is we don't know the players like the players know the players. Sometimes I remember Brent Andrews is one of the funniest guys that ever played here, but we didn't quite know that. He was, every time you call him in the office, he looked so nervous that he didn't seem funny. But from what I've heard, that he would have been right up at the top.
Funniest teammate you had in the NHL?
Jim Cummins, by far.
Bar none, eh? Hardest coach you played for?
Bob Hartley.
Worst NHL rink you played in?
New York. I hated that place. They were the rudest fans in the world, and you heard every chirp.
Yeah. First thing you bought when you signed your NHL contract?
A second-hand car, $3,500. Everybody laughed at me, but
that's a lot of money then.
That's right, it was.
What was it?
I didn't think it was going to last forever. So it was it was actually a Mustang, but it was a Mustang LX with a 4-cylinder and T-top roofs. So it was like a parachute when you drove it down the highway.
Best opposing GM to deal with in the queue during your time as GM here?
Oh, Andre Tourigny.
Former Moose coach as well. Favorite playoff series by the Mooseheads?
Man, there's been some. Well, it had to be the one in Quebec.
Yeah. Most heart and soul player you've had with the Mooseheads?
Trey Lewis.
And favorite team to beat?
Brad Cosner.
Yeah.
Close second.
Yeah.
Close second. How can I forget?
Yeah.
I got kicked under the table.
Favorite team to beat in the queue?
Moncton.
Has to be.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And it's funny. You always think of, and Cape Breton's a big rivalry, but for some reason, I don't know. It's us and Moncton. There's a healthy hate there, which you love to beat them.
Yeah.
I do remember being in Cape and then coming here, because in Cape, all you care about is Halifax. And then you come here and Cape's kind of irrelevant because Moncton's such a big rival. So it is true. But
the way the cycles have lined up too, right?
Yeah.
Playoff series. Yeah. And we've had more against them.
One quick story. I do remember you talked about Drouin being the most skilled guy. And I remember Cam coming to us. It was Cam and Dom and a couple older guys, Critchlow and Randall, and sat down, and because I had to give up my number, so for Drouin to come. So as a veteran, it was a shot at the ego for sure. But I do remember you sitting us down and saying, if you guys think that Nate is skilled, you wait till this guy shows up. And I think Joe had 3 assists in the first night or whatever it was, and I was like, okay, he's pretty good. Yeah. So.
He had some crazy skill.
And
that's, these are tough questions. No disrespect, because there's been a lot of really great hockey players here. But Joe did some incredible things. And he was one of those guys, if he lost the puck, he got it back. He had this knack for, you could get it from him, he'd get it right back from you.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you doing this, Cam. We won't take up any more of your time, so thanks again.
Okay,
thanks,
my pleasure, guys. Thanks.
Great interview, Cam Russell. Good to have him here, and some pretty cool stories too, right?
Yeah, he's one of the best storytellers of all time, and obviously it was great to get into that, but awesome to get into the trade deadline stuff and see kind of the revamped team that we have.
Well, good to have Cam. Thanks again for doing that with us, and thank you for listening wherever you get your podcasts, also tuning in on YouTube and watching, and make sure you hit the subscribe button and the bell button to get notified for the next episode. Episode 6 will be coming your way soon.
And if you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, make sure to subscribe, give us 5 stars and give us a review.
All right, thanks again. It's This is Moose Country, the official podcast of your Halifax Mooseheads. We appreciate you watching and listening.